when the cold of winter comes. You'll still have nearly a year until Amazon's Lord of the Rings television show premieres. Luckily, time flies when you're speculating wildly. Amazon has confirmed that the story takes place during the Second Age, so through the power of the appendices invested in me, and the tradition of fan-created timelines predating the internet, yeah, Led Zeppelin stoners and Oxford academics alike drawing maps in a library somewhere, I now pronounce us daydreaming about the key Middle-earth events we'll get to see. Havodad, Melonin. Let's get to it. The island of Numenor was brought out of the sea by the Valar as a gift to men early in the Second Age. The race of men had fought alongside the Noldor Elves to try and reclaim the Silmarils, very special holy gems of light from the naughty, rebellious Ainu Morgoth, as in Balrog of Morgoth. And yes, that's Silmarils as in the Silmarillion. The men of Numenor are called Dunedain, which will be recognizable to even casual Lord of the Rings fans, as this is the lineage of Aragorn. The Valar only asked of the men that they not sail so far from their shores as to no longer see them. A king eventually breaks this promise at the behest of Sauron, leading to the fall of Numenor, sometimes called the Drowning of Numenor because Eru Ilúvatar, the creator, tore Numenor back into the sea. This is actually how Sauron lost his ability to possess a seemingly human form. He did not put himself on rice fast enough. At the dawn of the Second Age, the Elves of Lindon established the Grey Havens. It lies on the Gulf of Lune, a location important not just as a practical harbor, but in wartime. You'll recognize the name as it is where Bilbo, Frodo, and Gandalf retire to at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. All that into the west? This was the west. The Grey Havens were not just a place of peace. It was a location held by both elves and men, making it a significant challenge to Sauron, and in that way as crucial of a location as Mount Doom in the Silmarillion. It's where men first landed after the fall of Numenor. Master of the Grey Havens Círdan held one of the three elven rings, Narya, alongside Galadriel with Nenya, and at the time High King Gil-galad with Vilya, although that ring would later be given to Elrond. It's worth noting that those three besties were the only folks onto Sauron even from his early days as Anatar. One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them, and you know the drill. But did you know that the One Ring and all of its little friends were actually forged in the Second Age? Sauron, disguised as Anatar, a man so handsome everyone swooned, except Galadriel, who said that's suspicious, that's weird, manipulates the elven smiths into making 19 rings for the elves, men, and dwarves. By that time, Sauron knew how to do the elven smithing himself and made the One Ring that went on to give PTSD to many a hobbit. But where did he forge it? Glad you asked. Mordor. It's where memories are made, where dreams come true, if you're the worst. And Sauron is the worst. Mordor's status as a very gooey, lava-filled standard for evildoers owes it all to the establishment of Barad-dûr. It took Sauron 600 years to build the Dark Tower and establish the stronghold, but once he had it, he was free to forge the One Ring and its fires in private. After the fall of Numenor, Sauron returned to Barad-dûr in secret and made a terrible shape for himself, the most famous interpretation of this being Peter Jackson's literal flaming eyeball. With the forging of the One Ring, Sauron didn't consider that the elves were particularly attuned to the energy of the rings, what with it being elven smithed and all. This connection clued them into his terrible deed and the fact that Anatar was just Sauron with cool glasses and good bronzer contouring. But that's what happened, and so the War of the Elves began. It spans most of the Second Age, so it's impossible to not deal with it. The reckoning affects the lives of both Galadriel and Elrond, who of course carry our story into the Third Age and establishes the political strife that must be overcome to defeat Sauron in those times. Most of the cities recognizable from both The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were established in the Second Age. Rivendell, also known as Imladris, was founded by Elrond in 1697, almost accidentally. He and his group of elven soldiers were too late to stop Sauron from destroying the lands of the Noldoran elves, including their capital Ost-in-Edhil, established in the early days of the Second Age, and so formed a stronghold in a valley just below what would become their home. Arnor was founded by Elendil, and Gondor was established to the south by his sons Isildur and Anarion in 3320 after they sailed off before being swallowed in the drowning of Numenor. Khazad-dûm was populated before the sun and the moon. I'm not exaggerating, that is literal. But its subterranean expansion, including the mines of Moria, took place during the right time period for us to see it. We may also see those dwarves fight alongside men to defeat a growing faction of orcs and the brief peaceful relations with elves to the west. And listen, that Balrog doesn't wake up until the Third Age, but how'd he get down there, huh? Put a Balrog in the show. I won't be mad, I promise. Fans will recognize the White Tree of Gondor from Peter Jackson's film trilogy. Isildur kept a fruit of the White Tree of Numenor and planted it when he established Gondor with his brother as a symbol of peace and in remembrance of their old lives. When Sauron captured Gondor, he burned the tree down, because why do anything if you aren't going to be the absolute cruelest about it? And the Dunedain themselves faced a strange fracturing and danced with early stages of fantasy fascism. The Dunedain had always shared an alliance with the Elves, but some of them got tired of this, tried to proclaim one race supremacy, promptly got manipulated by Sauron, and the Dunedain in the north who abandoned this tangle with darkness turned to wandering as rangers, a habit that may sound familiar. Speaking of elves and men, we'll certainly see the 12-year period of the last alliance, where elves and men of every faction united to stand against a rapidly mobilizing Sauron. It's the largest military union in Middle-earth's history, and contrary to more middling adaptations of Tolkien's works, dwarves did join as well, particularly the Longbeards. The burning of the White Tree inspired this political and military move towards unity, as the White Trees of the Men of Numenor were originally a gift from elves. So, Sauron inadvertently reminded them of how connected they once were. Hot guy, weird blob, flaming eyeball, it don't matter, he will play himself every time. Now, one of the most exciting casting announcements for the show was Galadriel, who will be played by his Dark Materials star Morfydd Clark. Fans have interpreted Galadriel's casting announcement as a sign that this series will be character-driven, not just realpolitik and special weta ears. Now, we've seen Galadriel's home of Lothlorien on screen a few times before, and those lands were inhabited by some elves in the First Age, but in the Second Age, it's Galadriel who fills the land with golden malorn trees along with Celeborn and establishes it as an elven utopia. Their daughter, Celebrian, doesn't marry Elrond until the Third Age, but does meet him in the Second Age, so there's a great chance for cross-cultural elven content. This promotional image broke the academic Tolkien internet. Why? If you look in the distance, you can see the silhouette of two trees. This is Valinor, an elven paradise from the First Age, lit by the light of the trees as the rest of Middle-earth is still bathed only in starlight. But we're not supposed to be covering the First Age. Is someone remembering? Are we getting a prequel episode? This is what I know. Galadriel was born in Valinor, one of the most promising scholars, fought for Valinor, and basically defied gods to get revenge for Valinor. And she's one of our protagonists. For that juicy angst, I'll allow a little reminiscence, and hopefully the Tolkien estate will too. Sadly, I'm not in charge. The minutes have passed like swift drafts of the sweet mead in lofty halls beyond the west, and they're calling security if I continue yammering on about the Second Age. After all, this is ScreenRant and not Tolkien Rant. Well, for now. One of these days, I'm gonna helms this deep. But it is not this day. Namarie.